4, scene 14. Enter Antony and Eros. Antony says, Eros, thou yet beholdest me? He's asking, can you see me? Am I really here? And the reason why he feels this insignificant is after the defeat. He feels that not only is he a failure, has he failed in the battle with Caesar, but he also feels that Cleo has let him down, and because of that it's like he's giving up on life. And Eros says, yes, noble lord. Sometimes we see a cloud that's dragonish, a vapor sometimes like a bear or a lion, a towered citadel, a pendant rock, a forked mountain, or a blue promontory, with trees upon it that nod unto the world and mock our eyes with air. And so what Antony's saying here is that he feels that he is a shadow of his former self, and he compares himself to a cloud that can take on many different shapes. One minute it looks like a bear, next minute it's looking like a lion, next minute it's looking like a strong tower. And so all he's trying to say is that he's not real, he's not tangible. That's the way he feels inside, and so he's projecting it to him as a real person. And then he says further on to Eros, thou hast seen these signs, they are black vespers pageants. And so the pageants are like flags which signal the approach of someone important. And in this case, Black Vesper is talking about night. And so he's saying these things are the signs of night approaching. Now we know that night is also a euphemism for what? For death. So he's talking about approaching death. And Eros says, yes, my lord. That which is now a horse, even with thought, the rack dislimns and make it indistinct as water is in water. And so what he's saying here is that he feels that he is nothing. It's again just a repetition of what he said earlier. He feels so insubstantial. Nothing is substantial. And Eros says, yes, it does, my lord. And then he says, Antony, my good knave Eros, my good servant, my faithful, my loyal servant, now thy captain is even such a body. I am like that nothingness. Here I am, Antony. I am Antony, yet cannot hold this visible shape. I can't stay in a solid human form. That's what he's saying, my knave. And now we have the reason why he feels he cannot stay in this state. And he says, I made these wars for Egypt. And that has been his motivation. Somewhere along the line, he lost his original motivation. It's no longer about Rome. It's no longer being one of the triple pillars of the world. Whatever he did it out of love for Cleopatra and the queen, whose heart I thought I had. Thought. In other words, he made a mistake. For she had mine, which whilst it was mine had annexed unto it 1,000,000 more, now lost. She, Eros, has packed cards with Caesar. She has chosen to align herself with Caesar, and false played my glory unto an enemy's triumph. She played me, she conned me, she manipulated me, all in favor of Caesar's winning. And when he says this, I think he speaks with such brokenness of spirit that Eros, a manly man, he feels touched. He feels so touched, and he starts crying. He's that emotional. And Antony says, nay, weep not, gentle Eros. There is left us ourselves to end ourselves. Don't cry. Don't cry. It's not as if everything is lost as yet. We can still salvage some dignity for ourselves. And how do we do that? He's talking here about an honorable death, an honorable killing. At that moment, Mardian the eunuch walks in, one of Cleo's people, and he projects his anger onto Mardian at that moment, and he says, "Oh, thy vile lady, she has robbed me of my sword, she has robbed me of my manhood, she has robbed me of my military successes." And Mardian says, "No, Antony, my mistress loved thee, and her fortunes mingled with thine entirely." This is a lie, because Mardian is saying, not only did she love you completely, but she was so committed to you that your losses are her losses, your wins are her wins. And we know that this is not true, because Cleo told him that he should embroider, he should make this as dramatic as he possibly can. And Antony doesn't fall for this. He says, hence, as in go away, saucy, it's quite literally, Suga. Hence, saucy eunuch, peace. She hath betrayed me and shall die the death. He is so angry. It's almost like his love is on hold, like it's disappeared, and he wants her to pay. He wants her to die. And Mardian says death of one person can be paid but once, and that she has discharged, that she has done. A person can only die once, and Cleo is already dead. What wouldest thou do is done unto thy hands. You wanted to kill her? She's already been killed. The last word she spake was, Antony, most noble Antony. Then in the midst of a tearing groan did break the name of Antony. It was divided between her heart and her lips. She rendered life thy name so buried in her. And then I think this is where he starts to play on Antony's emotions, and he makes him feel guilty, because he says, even as she died, with her last breath, she says, Antony, most noble Antony, which is a testament to her love. And then, in the midst of a tearing groan, did break the name of Antony. How do you break the name? In other words, as she was saying his name, she died. And so all that came out was, and dead. Okay? I don't think you can get anything more dramatic than that. Antony's, of course, shocked, and he says, dead, then dead. Unarmed, Eros. The long day's task is done, and we must sleep. Again, a different metaphor. For death, we must sleep. We must die. When he says unarmed, he's saying, take off my armor. Take off my armor. The long day's task, the fighting is over, it's finished. And then he turns and he looks at Mardian and he says, you know what, don't expect me to pay you as the messenger for the message you've come to be to deliver. The fact that I'm allowing you to leave here with your life, that is your payment. He says, that thou departest hence safe, does pay thy labor richly. Go. Your reward is that you're being allowed to live. And so Mardian, obviously seeing the mood that he's in, doesn't still talk a lot. He also just leaves. And he says, off, pluck off. In other words, he's hasty, he's determined. He just wants to rip off the armor. He wants to get out of it. The sevenfold shield of Ajax cannot, not Ajax, this is not Ajax, Cape Town. The sevenfold shield of Ajax cannot keep the battery from my heart. The sevenfold shield of Ajax cannot keep the battery of my heart. Again, reference to Greek mythology, which Shakespeare's audience would have known. The shield of Ajax is 7 times stronger than your ordinary shield. It's made of brass, and he says, that strong shield can't protect my heart from being battered. It's paining, you know. And I think this is now on hearing the news that Cleo is dead, and he says, oh, cleave my sides. In other words, can my body just burst open, right, in two. Heart, once be stronger than thy continent, crack thy frail case, apace, Eros, apace, no more a soldier. I am no more a soldier. Bruised pieces go. You have been nobly born from me a while. And it's like at this part, mentally, he has fallen apart. He has fallen apart, and he wants to be alone, and he tells Eros to leave him alone. And he says, now he's alone, so now he can really say what he's thinking. And he says, I will overtake thee, Cleo, and weep for my pardon. He's saying two things here. Firstly, he's saying, what does he mean, I will overtake you? He's now thinking Cleo is dead, and so she's on the journey to the underworld, and he's saying, I'm going to die, and I will get there before you do. I'm going to get to the underworld before you. That's the first thing he's saying. And then secondly, he says, I will weep for my pardon. I will cry, and I'm going to beg you to forgive me, because you killed yourself because of me, and you died loving me. And he says, so it must be, for now all length is torture. As long as I'm alive, I'm being tortured. Since the torch is out, again, the torch is referring to Cleo. Lie down and strain no further. Now all labor mars what it does, yea, very force entangles itself with strength. Seal then, and all is done. Eros, I come, my queen. Eros, stay for me. Where souls to couch on flowers, we'll hand in hand, and with our sprightly port make the ghosts gaze. Dido and Aeneas shall want troops, and all the haunt be ours. And so at this point, it's quite clear he's made up his mind. He's definitely going to kill himself. And he says, when we get to the underworld, Cleo, you and I, it's going to be this blissful experience. We are going to hold hands, and we'll walk, and we'll be the envy of other couples. And he gives the example here of a very famous couple, Queen Dido and her lover, who was Aeneas. I don't know how, you can choose how you want to pronounce that. And he says all the other couples will be envious of us and the way we just love each other and the way we are together. And so he ends off by calling, come, Eros, Eros. And when Eros comes in, he says, what do you want, my lord? And Antony says, since Cleopatra died, I have lived in such dishonor that the gods detest my baseness. And on the basis of his military life that he's led, honor is everything to him. And right now his actions to him, to Caesar, not to Caesar, to Antony, has been dishonorable. And the only way he can regain any kind of honor is if he kills himself in an honorable fashion. He says, I live in such dishonor that the gods hate me. I that with my sword courted the world, and over green Neptune's back with ships made cities. He talks about his past successes. And he says, with my sword in my hand, I've been invincible. I have been able to court the world. I've been able to fight, to conquer the world. And I love this beautiful turn of phrase of Shakespeare when he says, and over green Neptune's back, meaning he traveled across the sea. Neptune, king of the sea, and over green Neptune's back. Green, of course, referring to the waves, with ships made cities. I have conquered, I have built, I have rebuilt, condemn myself to lack the courage of a woman. So of course men are the ones who traditionally are seen as very courageous. Women are scared, frail, helpless. And he says, I've got the courage of a woman. I've become so weak. Less noble mind than she which by her death our Caesar tells I am conqueror of myself. So he feels inferior to Cleo because of her death by her own hand. Thou art sworn, Eros, that when the time should come, which now is come indeed, when I should see behind me the inevitable prosecution of disgrace and horror, that on my command thou then wouldest kill me. And he's reminding Eros that he has promised, that he has vowed that he will kill Antony, and he will save him from further disgrace. And he says, do it. The time is come. Thou strikest not me, to Caesar thou defeatest. And I think when he says these words, wanting to be killed, when he says it to Eros, he obviously on his face he sees the horror, because this is not something that Eros wants to do. And he says, when you kill me, you're not really hurting me, you're hurting Caesar. And it's Caesar that we need to defeat. And he says, put color in thy cheek. In other words, be strong, be courageous, be brave. But Eros loves Antony. He is loyal to a fault. And Eros says, the gods withhold me. Shall I do that which all the Parthian darts, though enemy lost aim and could not? He says, how can I kill you when you've been on so many battlefronts and the enemies couldn't kill you, and now you're expecting me to kill you? Me, little Eros. Antony says, Eros, wouldst thou be windowed in great Rome? Do you want to be a witness and see thy master, Antony, thus with pleached arms tied, the equivalent of handcuffs, bending down his corrigible neck, his face subdued to penetrative shame, while the wheel seat of fortunate Caesar drawn before him branded his baseness that ensued? Do you want to see me so humiliated? I will be tied to Caesar's chariot, and so Caesar will be driving through the streets of Rome with his prisoner, with his high status prisoner, me being Antony, tied behind, and the people would be jeering, throwing stuff, shouting all kinds of insults at Antony. And he says, is that how you want to see me being brought low? Because that's what baseness means. Something that is brought very low. And Eros says, I would not see it. I don't want to see it. And Antony says, come then with a wound. I must be cured. What wound? He's talking about a mortal wound, a fatal wound. Draw that thy honest sword which thou hast worn, most useful for thy country. And he indirectly says, you can still be useful for your country once again if you take the sword and you create a wound. What is a wound? It's an opening in the body. If you do that, so that I can die by that wound, then you will be serving your country. And Eros, oh sir, pardon me. When you say pardon me, you're saying excuse me, almost forgive me. And he's saying forgive me for what? For the act of killing. And Antony thinks he's saying, oh, forgive me for stabbing you, for killing you. But that's not what Eros is saying. Antony says, when I did make thee free, sworest thou not then to do this which I bade thee? Do it at once, or thy precedent services are all but accidents unpurposed. And so Antony pursues, he continues with his emotional blackmail, and he says, I freed you. You were probably an indentured servant, and if you don't do this thing, everything that you've done before will be null and void. And he says, draw your sword and come to me. And Eros, remember, he's already said, oh sir, pardon me. He says, turn from me, then that noble countenance wherein the worship of the whole world lies. Turn away from me. I don't want to look at you at this moment when he has his sword in his hand. I mean, he says that's the countenance, that's the face that the whole world looks up to, that they honor, they adore, they admire, they hold in high esteem your face. And Antony agrees, and he turns away. And Eros says, my sword is drawn. There's that hesitation in his voice. And Antony says, then let it do at once the thing why thou hast drawn it. Let your sword serve the purpose. What is the reason that you took it out? You took it out to kill me, so do it. And Eros says, my dear master, my captain, and my emperor. That is such beautiful words of deep respect. Let me say before I strike this bloody stroke, farewell. So before I plunge the sword into flesh, let me say goodbye. 'Tis said, man, and farewell. So Antony is very abrupt, and he's not taking in the manner in which Eros is saying goodbye. He's thinking of himself here. He just wants to be killed and have it over. Then he says, yes, 'tis said, man, and farewell. And Eros says, farewell, great chief. Shall I strike now? Great chief. The respect, it's really touching, because he has seen the faults and the flaws of Antony, and he still loves him, he still respects him, he still admires him, and he's still loyal. And Antony says, now, Eros. But remember, his back, he has turned, his back is facing Eros. And Antony's probably flinching as he expects to feel that sword penetrating his flesh. But what does Eros do? He kills himself. Why, there then, thus do I escape the sorrow of Antony's death. And Eros dies. He did not die a coward. On the contrary, because of his great love for for Antony, he chooses to sacrifice himself instead. And then Antony gets this shock, and he says, thrice nobler than myself, thou teachest me, O brave Eros, what I should, and thou couldst not. He says, you are so brave, and now you have taught me a lesson that I should be killing myself. I shouldn't be asking you to kill me. And he says, my queen and Eros have by their brave instruction got upon me a nobleness in record. He says, two people whom I admire, Cleo, have killed themselves. They have so much courage. So how can I'm the great military man, how can I not have enough courage to kill myself? And he says, but I will be a bridegroom in my death, and run into death as to a lover's bed. And he says, the way the bridegroom looks forward, and he is excited to get into bed with his bride, in the same way Antony is saying he is excited to go and meet death. Come then, and Eros, thy master dies, thy scholar. So you are the teacher, and I'm learning from you in death. To do thus I learned of thee. And he falls on his sword. But clearly Antony doesn't do such a great job because he doesn't die. And I think maybe it entered into his, his colon, the central part there. So something is punctured. So he's in a lot of pain, and he's obviously bleeding. The Americans say bleeding out. There isn't something like bleeding out. You're just bleeding. Bleeding implies the blood is leaving your body. And he's surprised, and he says, "How? Not dead, not dead. The God, oh, dispatch me." And so he calls for whoever is on duty, and he says, "Come and finish me off." And then comes in Desertus, who's a guard, and others are behind him. And the first guard says, "What is the noise?" And Antony says, "I have done my work ill." In other words, I've done a bad job, friends. Oh, make an end of what I have begun. And the second guard, who's clearly also very loyal and respectful of Antony, says, "The star is fallen, the bright star out of the heaven. And time is at his period." The first one says, it's obviously his time to die. And everyone says, "Alas and woe," and they're quite upset. And Antony says, "Let him that loves me strike me dead." And the first God says, "Not I." And the second God said, "Not I." And the third God says, "None of us, nor anyone." And this is real evidence of their love for Antony. I don't know why I keep saying Caesar. Their love for Antony. And Desertus says, and they leave. And Desertus says, "Thy death and fortune bid thy followers fly." So the people who are still loyal to you, look, they're all leaving. And he says, "This sword, but shown to Caesar with this tidings, shall enter me with him." And he picks up Antony's sword. And so Desertus is a traitor at the worst possible moment. Even as Caesar is mortally wounded, he chooses to take his sword, and he says, "This sword I'm going to give to Caesar. And when I show Caesar that I am coming bearing Antony's sword, Caesar will accept me, probably reward me, and he'll give me some plum position in his army." Then enters Diomedes. "Where's Antony?" "There, Diomedes, there." And the way he the way he speaks to Diomedes, there isn't much care or concern for Antony. And Diomedes says, "Is he still alive? Lives he? Wilt thou not answer me, man?" But Desertus has taken the sword and he has left. Antony, who's obviously in pain and suffering, he will die, but it's going to take a long time to die. And Antony says, "Art thou there, Diomedes? Draw thy sword and give me sufficing strokes for death." In other words, stab me several times until you are certain I'm dead. And Diomedes says, "Most absolute Lord, my mistress Cleopatra sent me to thee." Huh? What is he saying? "Most absolute Lord, my mistress Cleopatra sent me to thee." Antony says, now this man is getting weaker by the moment because of blood loss, and he says, "When did she send thee?" Meaning, the implication is, did she send you before she died? Is she still alive? What's going on here? And Diomedes says, "Now, my lord, she sent me now." So she's still alive. Where is she? Locked in a monument. She had a prophesying fear of what hath come to pass. For when she saw, which never shall be found, you did suspect she had disposed with Caesar, and that your rage would not be purged. He sent you word she was dead, but fearing, since how it might work, hath sent me to proclaim the truth, and I am come, I dread, too late. Wow, what is Diomedes saying? He's saying exactly what has happened. Cleo sent me to you. Cleo had what do they say? A prophesying fear. She suddenly was worried. What if Antony hears the news that I am dead and he also kills himself? So she sends Diomedes to tell him, no, Antony, I'm not dead, I'm alive. And I am come, I dread, too late. Antony says, too late, good Diomed. Call my God, I pray thee. What ho, the emperor's God, the God, what ho, come, your Lord calls. And 4 or 5 of the God of Antony's coming, carry me, bear me, good friends, where Cleopatra bides. 'Tis the last service I shall command you. I don't know at this point how you feel about Antony. I have mixed emotions. On the one hand, Antony needs to be slapped, the fact that he wants to see Cleo before he dies. On the other hand, love is love. Love is true love. It forgives a multitude of sins. After discovering that she manipulated him, he still wants to see her. And the first God thinks it's a bad idea to move him and says, woe are we, sir. You may not live to wear all your true followers out. In other words, we shouldn't move you. And everyone says, most heavy day, depressing, serious, grave day. Antony says, nay, my good fellows, do not please sharp fate to grace it with your sorrows. Bid that welcome which comes to punish us, and we punish it, seeming to bear it lightly. Take me up, I have led you often in battle. Carry me now, good friends, and have my thanks for all. And so because he asks so intensely, and because he reminds them of how well he has led them, they decide that they will take Antony to where Cleo is. And that's the end of Act 4, Scene 14.